Hello everyone, welcome to Self-Knowledge. Today we are going to see the second topic of this free self-knowledge course. And today we are going to be talking about what is death, and we are going to be seeing what dies and what doesn't die at the moment that the physical body dies. So the objective of today's topic will be to know what death is, as death is an important part of life, and you are going to see why. We are going to see what is the process that the disembodied soul goes through when the physical body dies. What are those things that people live when having a near-death experience? And we will see by talking about this if we really only live once or if we live successive existences. Also, we are going to study what types of death exist, how death liberates, and as I was saying, what dies and what doesn't die at the moment of the physical death. And the important thing is to note that everything that we are going to talk about on this topic and throughout the course can be verified by each of you, as the information that we are sharing is not intended to generate a concept in which you have to believe or that you have to doubt. Rather, it is intended to motivate you to question, to move you to investigate for yourself. And the next topic will be about astral projection, that is next Friday. And there we will teach how to achieve conscious astral projection, and we will see how we can corroborate through the practice of the conscious astral projection all this information that we are going to be talking today and many other things for yourselves. So it is necessary to start this topic by remembering the three parts that make us up, as we saw in the previous topic, because if we have it clear, we can get to understand what dies and what doesn't die in ourselves. So, as we study in the first topic of this self-knowledge course, we are made up of three parts. The first one is our physical body, which is the part of matter in us, and it is our vehicle of manifestation that we use to live and to move in this third dimension. And the second part is our soul or mind, that is made of energy, and it is that internal part in us that comprises 97% of our consciousness or our essence, but that is currently trapped within all of our different ways of being. All our mechanical reactions, our fears, our concepts, our beliefs, our anger, our impatience, our laziness, our pride, our greed, our lies, our imbalance, our envy, etc. They are conditioning 97% of our essence. And that is actually our soul or mind. And the third part that makes us up is our spirit or consciousness. And it is the 3%, but it is free and unconditioned essence. So it is like the divine part in us. It is made of pure light, and it is what is real and what is eternal in each one of us. So having reviewed this point, let's talk about death. And actually, the ignorance about death is the reason why most people are afraid of it, because they don't see that death is the final goal or the objective of everything. And if a person truly gets to understand what death is, he will obviously no longer be afraid of it, and he will be able to enter into the mysteries of life and death. So it will be like easier for that person to get to know himself. You're going to see that the reason to live is to die, and that we have no other task than this. You are born to die, and you die just to be born. And you can see that if the germ doesn't die, well, the plant doesn't grow. So death is just the end of something and at the same time the start of something. So we are going to understand something very important, and it is that death liberates in all cases. So let's see this. Once we leave the sacred absolute Son, which is the source or God from which we all come, and we come to this physical manifestation, we are given 3,000 opportunities in what is known as the wheel of samsara to try to achieve the intimate self-realization. And in each opportunity, we are going to create a soul going through a process of evolution through the different kingdoms of nature. And upon reaching the human kingdom on each of those 3,000 cycles, we have the right on each cycle to 108 human physical bodies. So that means that we have the right to return in 324,000 human physical bodies passing through the physical death. And this process will happen mechanically. We are going to be born and die, and be born and die, one and again, and once and again. If we don't understand the importance of psychological death, which allow us to achieve the intimate self-realization of the being in one existence. So we can get to free ourselves from this wheel of constant born and death. And for that reason, it is important that we get to know that there are three types of death, which are closely related to each other, and that one couldn't be studied without studying the other two. The first one is the death of the physical body. The second one is the second death. And the third one is the psychological death. So let's study each one of them. The death of the physical body, and let's see the process that we live when our physical body dies. So the death of the physical body begins with a state of catalepsy that lasts 72 hours, where apparently the physical body is dead, but this state can be actually suspended at any time, with which the dying person will return to the body during this period. There are actually many stories of people who have returned from death during that time, and there are many stories of people who were buried alive and their coffins were found, or their corpses were found with gestures of despair because they returned during that time. And unfortunately, nowadays, almost nobody is aware of the process of death that was formerly known by all tribes and peoples of the planet. And currently, the dying people are buried alive, or they are autopsied before the 72 hours pass. And this could be avoided if people would know better the process of death and were not so afraid of it. If we were to respect the old way again, and a 72 hours wake or funeral is made, this could be like avoided. And after those 72 hours, it can be confirmed that the person already died. But what happens during those 72 hours? Well, during that time, those 3 days, three trials take place, and they take place in the following way. The first trial is, in the first 5 minutes, the disembodied person make like a conscious retrospection of each one of his acts in this existence, carefully observing each event of that lived existence. And upon reaching the very moment of his birth, what that person does is that he compares the existence lived with the plan that he had for that existence. And that is the reason why people who have had near-death experiences say that they saw a like their like if their life or their life like flashing um, before their eyes like a movie. That is the reason why, and that is the reason why also people who have had near-death experiences say that after that they saw a tunnel and a light, a tunnel and like a light at the end of the tunnel. And well, we must know that the tunnel is actually our spine. And as our essence goes up from this third dimension, which in us, in our inner dimensions, has its base on our sexual center that represents like the earth in us, to it is going to the superior dimensions where these trials take place, and the light that they manage to see are those higher centers that in us represents that so known as heavens. And actually, we will understand this topic better or more clearly when we see topic number 5, where we are going to be talking about the dimensions and where they are in us. So, the objective of this first trial is to review each of the acts of the existence to make us aware of all of them, and then compare the lived existence with the plan that we bring for it. So we must know that every person before birth brings a plan for that existence. For that reason, it is extremely important that we start to ask ourselves, to dig into our own consciousness, to find the answer to the question, what is the purpose of my existence? Because it is actually really very sad to come to existence and spend all the time that we have to live so absorbed in the trivialities of the world, so absorbed in work, in problems, in pleasures, in distractions, that we don't take time to ask ourselves, what did I really come for? And let another existence pass without achieving this purpose. And well, this first trial is made by our unconsciousness, and the second trial takes place approximately 24 hours after the beginning of the death process. And it is before the Lords of the Divine Law. And in this trial, two things will be considered. The first one is the atomic weight of each one of our psychological elements or our defects, psychological defects. For example, my defect of anger, my violent self, will be weighted there to see if it has increased or decreased in relation to my previous existence. And they will weight also our pride, our lust, our laziness, our greed, our envy, our tyranny, our selfishness, our lies, etc. And they will compare it with the weight that those defects had in the previous existence to see how much they have increased or decreased. So it is common that if we don't work on ourselves, for the atomic weight of our defects to increase from one existence to the other, because we spend our lives so identified, so fascinated with this world, and we let all those defects constantly manifest in us and constantly steal our energy. And every time that I let, for example, my anger to manifest, yell or hurt, it is actually feeding on my energy, and it is thus increasing its atomic weight. And so I'm getting more and more irate. So that is the first thing they're going to take into account, the atomic weight of each defect. And the second thing will be the amount of them. That's the quantity. There are then that amount are compared with those that the dying person had at the end of his previous existence to see if they increased in number or decreased in this one. And that is the second trial, in which our psychological eyes will be counted and weighted. And the third trial will take place at approximately 48 hours after the start of the death process. And in this one, the soul of the disembodied is taken to the court of the objective justice, and there three things will be judged. First, the weight of the good and the bad deeds of each one of the selves or psychological aggregates. So here, what they are going to take into account are like the actions, nor the intentions of our defects or the desires of our defects, but the actions, the deeds. And the good deeds are those, let's say, acts of charity, or also the conscious acts that we made in that existence. Charity, we know, is the times that we help someone when we gave food or shelter, or the times that we help someone financially or emotionally, when we gave some physical help in a disinterested way, either to a person or an animal. And the conscious acts that are also good deeds are the times that we did something to help someone to awaken consciousness. Those good deeds are going like to be weighted here, and also are going to be weighted our bad deeds, and these are all the times that we let our psychological defects to act instead of our consciousness. How many times did I lie? Did I hurt someone? Did I fornicate? Etc. All our bad deeds will be taken in consideration in this trial, and we can see actually this trial as the judgment of Osiris that represents, as you can see here, the soul of the disembodied being taken to the court of the divine justice by Anubis. And we see there a scale where the heart is being weighted on one side, and on the other one is the feather of truth. Every bad deed like add a weight to that heart. And also in this third trial is going to be considered the number of times that each of these psychological elements was manifested in the existence. For example, if they are measuring my lust, they are going to take into account the number of times that I let my lust to manifest in that previous existence. And also, they are going to measure the fire in our spinal cord to see if this person worked on the supersex, making their sexual energy, which is the kundalini, to ascend through the spine or not. And at the end of this process, at the end of these three trials, the sum and subtraction of fractions is made, which have to determine several things. The first thing that is going to be determined in this verdict is the karma that this soul will endure in its next existence. So there will be determined if the person in his next life will suffer from such diseases as karma from the bad actions made in the previous existence, or if we'll come with such favorable situations or unfavorable situations, and if the person will face such situations, etc. And there will be determined all the karmic like processes that the person will have to live as a result of their bad actions, so that we can learn from our mistakes, because karma is like a process of learning. because we'll see that we never see things so bad when we do them, but we like we never seem the things so bad when we do them to others than when they do it to us. So that is the reason why when we start reflecting and learning from all the situations that we are living, then we actually can get a real big lesson, a real great understanding. But also, it's not only about the karmic or negative situations, also the favorable situations that will be experienced will be determined at this point, such as that at some point in that existence, let's say by Dharma, we will receive, for example, the knowledge of the three factors so that we can revolutionize our consciousness and that we can awaken. Also, in this trial, will be determined the electropsychic design of the new personality. We all come into each existence with a pattern, a different pattern, with an electropsychic design according to which our personality is going to develop. If we are going to be shy, or if we are going to be outgoing, or if we are going to be with a tendency to anger, or with a tendency to intellectualism, or with a tendency to leadership, or with low self-esteem, or with a tendency to lust, etc. Also, in our electropsychic design is the zodiac sign according to which we are going to be born. Date, the day, actually the day and time of our birth is marked, and all this will be like combined so that we develop a certain way of being, a certain personality that will allow all the karmas that we have pending to be charged to us. We are going to see that only with inner work can we free ourselves from all those conditions that are imposed on us by the mechanics of life, because all of this is mechanical. And all this if the person has the right to a new existence, if he hasn't exhausted his 108 existences as human yet. And after this judgment, Anubis, like the Lord of Objective Justice, orders the angel of death to cut the silver cord of the disembodied and be released from his physical body. But the angel of death asked the Divine Mother of the dying person the permission to do that. And if the angel of death is authorized by the Divine Mother, it actually takes up to 24 hours 24 hours to cut the silver cord with the death ray. But if the mother doesn't authorize the death ray because she considers that there are still things that the person must live or experience or fulfill, or she decides to give him another opportunity to achieve the purpose of his existence, then the person would return to the physical body before those 72 hours. Unfortunately, at this time, almost everyone is unaware of these processes, formerly known, and this would be avoided if people knew the process of death better. And as I was saying, with the 72 hours wake, it could be like avoided, like the interruption of this process. And once the angel of death has cut the silver cord, three alternatives open up for the disembodied. The first alternative is given if the person has not yet exhausted his 108 existences and still has another opportunity to try his self-realization in that cycle. In that case, his soul will be taken to a region that is known as limbo, that is in caverns submerged inside the planet Earth, but in the fifth dimension, where that the person will project all his life and will continue there with the consciousness asleep, where he will wait for his next body by continually flashing back to his previous existence. If we actually astrally unfold and we have the opportunity to go to the limbo and visit like a deceased relative, for example, a friend, who has not yet been reborn, we will find him in that place repeating the same things he did while living, totally convinced that he is alive. He will be like in his dream. And we can go and we can tell him that he's dead, but they just don't believe us. And soon they return to their dream. And hence the importance of awakening consciousness, because that is just our current state. We go to sleep every night, which is like a small daily death, and we go out from our body and we go to that other plane, and we are not aware of being outside our body. But we are there projecting all our desires, our thoughts, our emotions. We see that we spend the whole day identified, for example, with work. And at night, we continue working in our dream or doing housework or any of our daily activities. And we are totally convinced that we are awakened, that we are in the, that we are awake, that we are in in the third dimension, that we are here in our house doing our things or at work. And even though incredible things happen to us, like we see elephant flyings outside our window, we are not able to make ourselves aware of being outside the physical body. And when we return to the body, we remember all those experiences as dreams. And if we continue in that state of unconsciousness, it will be the same when we die. If we don't work on ourselves, if we don't make an effort to awaken our consciousness, we will go to that other plane, we will go to limbo to wait for a new physical body, totally asleep, without realizing that we have died. Because the 3% of consciousness is like awakened to attend to these trials, and then again we return to our normal dormant state in limbo, waiting there for the necessary conditions are met so that we can mechanically return to existence in a new physical body. Well, that is the first alternative. And the second alternative is given if the person has completed his 108 existences, and that when measuring the level of fire in his spine, Anubis finds that he had not awakened the fire and he has embraced that the Kundalini, which is a sacred fire, through his spine. In that case, it is ruled as dry reed, and the verdict is to be sent to abyss. Then his soul is taken to be submerged in the infra dimensions of planet Earth, where it will experience what is known as the second death, which I will explain next. And the third alternative is given if the person worked with the sacred fire and increased its level on his spinal cord. Anubis and the Divine Mother of that person will give him strength and instructions so that in the next physical body, the soul can work towards the self-realization of its being. So even if the person just lived his existence number 108, if he worked on himself and increased his sacred fire level on the spinal cord, he could be entitled to an existence 109 to try to fulfill his work. And this is actually all the process that the soul lives when the physical body dies. Now let's see the second type of death, which is the second death. The second death is what awaits the souls of people who exhaust their 108 existences without awakening consciousness. When one doesn't work on herself, the psyche or soul is lost at the end of the 108 existences as human. And this soul is taken to abyss, and it penetrates the 9 Dante's circles, from where it will not come out until nature disintegrates each one of the defects that we were creating and feeding throughout successive existences. And after thousands of years of suffering and decomposition, when the essence is completely pure, it is liberated from the abyss. And this step is called the second death. Then that clean spark will begin a new cycle. Remember that we are entitled to 3,000 cycles of manifestation in this wheel. And there, that spark will be able to create a new soul going through the different kingdoms of nature, with the possibility that upon reaching the human kingdom, it will decide in one of its 108 existences as human to work on itself to achieve the self-realization. And well, that is the second death, and it is the way in which our essence manages to free itself from the ego, but without rescuing the wisdom that is rescued when we do the work of disintegration of our psychological defects, practicing the psychological death voluntarily in one of our 108 existences. And the third type of death is the psychological death. And it is the most important one, since it is the one that will free us from the death of the physical body, yes, and from the second death. In addition, this death is what will allow us to free ourselves from suffering, from misery, and from the constant slavery to which all our different ways of being have subjected us. We have within us millions of psychological defects that lead us to make mistakes, to hurt others, and to hurt ourselves, and that don't allow us to awaken our consciousness. Every time that we let one of these ways of being manifest, it steals our energy, and that leads it to grow more and gain more power and more control over us. For example, if for a long time we have allowed ourselves to have states of anger, of impatience, fight, intolerance, and resentment, the defect of anger will grow to the point that it will have such a control over us, and it will be like for a longer time each time. And we will get to define ourselves as an angry person. The same with sadness. If we constantly let like pessimistic thoughts, feelings of desolation, anguish, bitterness to manifest in us, that defect will grow until we become constantly depressed people. And the same goes for all defects such as drugs, lust, pornography, adultery, envy, criticism, greed, death, violence, etc. The more energy that a defect has trapped, the more it can enslave us. So the psychological death frees us from the constant slavery in which the various selves or ways of being have us. We have, as I was saying, millions of psychological defects or sins that are manifested in our daily lives and that permanently deplete all our energies unnecessarily. And there are actually defects of all kinds. You can see here just many, but we have anger, we have irritability, we have worry, deceit, lying, fear, jealousy, lust, fornication, vanity, conceit, self-esteem. Yes, it is a defect. Self-regard, self-sympathy, suffering, ill will, discouragement, dislike, sloth, idleness, curiosity, cheating, begging, waste, alcoholism, drug addiction, gluttony, envy, etc. As the poet of Mantua used to say, even if we had a plate of steel and 1,000 tongues, it wouldn't be enough for us to enumerate all of our defects fully. Um, each of these defects has trapped a small portion of our consciousness, which is like what gives life to the defect. And when a psychological defect dies, the trapped spark of consciousness, which is like the real partiness, is released. But it is also important to know that if one psychological defect can be eliminated, all the defects can be. If we can set free one spark from the darkness, we can set free all of them. If we free ourselves from all our psychological defects, we will have recovered all our consciousness and we have integrated our own being, achieving the sacred individuality. And this is why we say that the reason for living is to die. Now, what is the practice of psychological death? Actually, the practice of psychological death is very simple. It consists on three simple steps. The first one is to discover the defect with self-observation. The second one is to judge it with reflection until you understand it is a defect and that it is a part of your ego, not of your consciousness. And the third step is to eliminate it by begging your Divine Mother to eliminate it. For example, you are walking down the street and you see someone who looks attractive to you. And if you observe yourself, immediately a lustful defect is going to arise. And if you observe yourself, you can discover an unmistakable sensation in the sexual center, a sudden feeling of attraction in your instinctive center. You feel like in love in the emotional center, and you start idealizing that person there in the intellectual center, imagining scenes with that person, projecting scenarios where you are both together, why not having sex. And you could also observe the orders that the cells are giving you in the motor center. The desire to go and start a conversation, the desire to move in a certain way, or to laugh out loud to call the attention of that person. And this is the self being observed in the action. And actually, this might seem like a very common and apparently harmless situation, but if you reflect on the fact that this is a psychological defect that manifests itself every time you see someone who is attractive to you, who constantly spends your energies. If, for example, you are if you already have a partner, this same defect of lust is what is going to lead you not to be able to have a stability in a relationship and to always be unfaithful to that person. And you can also see that through this self, we are feeding other defects such as lasciviousness, promiscuity, and fornication. Then we realize that all these are the manifestations of a defect that has trapped an important portion of our consciousness, and that has trapped the virtue of fidelity and chastity. And in this way, we understand that this is not a manifestation of our consciousness, because consciousness is not sexually excited or falling in love with everyone who passes by. Then, with that understanding, we proceed to the elimination of each observed detail, and in this way, we release our consciousness. Since the idea is to remain in a state of self observation throughout the day to discover the details of anger, of impatience, of anxiety, of sadness, of envy, of jealousy, of laziness, sorry, etc., etc., etc. And go asking the Divine Mother, who is the force of love of your consciousness, to eliminate them, because the greater the number of dead selves, the greater the self awareness. Also, having those comprehensions will lead you to your own knowledge, will lead you to get to know yourself in a deep way and make radical changes in you. I really invite you to try the psychological death. Through the self observation, discover the acting defect, judge it until you understand that it is a defect, and then beg the Divine Mother for its elimination in order to free yourself from all the psychological aggregates that have your consciousness asleep. And well, now to finish this topic, let's see. First, let me tell you something about the reflection. What I was talking about was the death on march that we saw in the previous topic, to be constantly in self-observation and eliminating every defect. But also, as we saw in the, this week that we were practicing the reflective meditation practice. Yeah, we were practicing the reflective meditation. We saw that we can study in meditation our psychological defects. So we get to reflect to get to understand better why that psychological defect is acting within myself, by asking, for example, what is this defect leading me? What is this psychological defect trying to, I don't know, make me do? Or why is this making me act like this? Or how am I acting when I'm over the condition of this defect? When have this defect manifested in my life? And what would be the conscious way to act? And that way you get to reflect on all your different wrong ways of being, and to see more details of the defects and get to eliminate them. Now, let's see. Now, yes, what dies at the moment of the death of the physical body, and what doesn't die. So, what is it that dies? Along with the physical body, the vital body and the personality are the parts that die at the end of existence. And what doesn't die? Well, we must know that the essence or consciousness of each person is immortal, and is the only real and true things in us. And it never dies. It is like the part of God of each one. But also the psychological elements in which our essence or consciousness is bottled up return from one existence to another. And in each of these, they are commonly strengthened. And they don't die because they have trapped inside an immortal essence that gives them life. So they will only die when in one of our 108 existences as humans, we decide to do the conscious work of eliminating them with a psychological death. But if we don't voluntarily eliminate them, they will eventually disintegrate in the abyss when the second death is completed. If we do this work of eliminating all our psychological defects, freeing all our consciousness that is currently trapped in our ego by practicing the psychological death, And we make this released energy ascend through our spine with the practice of supersex that we learned in the previous lecture. And if we develop conscious love for all humanity by helping them to awaken their consciousness, teaching them these three factors of the consciousness revolution, which are the ego death, the spiritual birth, and the sacrifice for humanity, we will reach the purpose of our existence, and death will no longer be able to reach us. We will become immortal beings of awakened consciousness, and we will free ourselves from physical death. Sorry, let me check on that. Just a minute. I'm sorry. I was saying that if we do this work consciously, we will reach the purpose of our existence, and we will free ourselves from the physical death and from the second death, and we will ascend to the higher worlds of consciousness. And well, this has been today's topic. I hope it has helped you to understand that death is not something to be afraid of, since it is just as natural as being born. And I also hope that it has moved you belonging to investigate the things for yourself. And I invite you to watch in the next video that we will post next Friday, where we are going to be talking about astral projection or astral unfolding, and we are going to see everything related to this very important practice, and we will see how we can achieve the conscious astral projection. So thank you very much to all of you, and see you next time. Ciao, ciao.